What's going on, everyone? So welcome to my latest video. This is obviously my latest catch-up video. This time it is for the month of September. For those of you that are new to the channel, this is of course where I talk about all the 2022 films that I saw in the month of September of 2022. I will not be talking about any spoilers, and I will not be going truly in depth. If you do want my more in-depth thoughts, you guys can follow me on Letterboxd. If you're not familiar with what Letterboxd is, it is a great app where movie buffs, movie critics, casual moviegoers all come together. They're able to rate movies. They're able to just blog movies that they've seen, rate them. It's great stuff, honestly. So would highly recommend that. Mine is down below. But guys, you clicked on this video, so again, I will get it into my thoughts. Again, very briefly on all these movies that I saw. I think it was a total of 10 2020 movies I saw in September. So guys, enough exposition. Let's get started. So kicking things off, I saw Sonic the Hedgehog 2 to start off the month. This was something I missed in theaters. It was in theaters for quite a while. I didn't really have too much interest in this movie, truth be told. Just because the first one I enjoyed somewhat, but I wasn't like a huge fan of it. And the second one is more of the same. I had some enjoyment with it, for sure, but overall, it's just kind of like a forgettable movie. I understand why it has a following. I understand why people like it, for sure, especially if you've played the games. For me, I didn't play the games, so I really don't have any nostalgia or, anything that really kind of leans me towards this type of movie. But it is a movie that I can say, yeah, it's okay, it's whatever. It's out there. I get why people like it, just something that I kind of felt middle of the road about. There's going to be probably a third one, a fourth one. I'm sure there will also be like a spinoff, but for me, it's whatever. Sonic the Hedgehog 2, I personally will be giving a... Next up, we have Bowl, which is on Showtime. This was a movie that actually one of my supervisors recommended. I had never heard of it until he had recommended it to me. And watching it, I quite enjoyed this movie. It's a revenge movie that throws you right into the mix of revenge, and you as an audience member have to try to pick up on things that the main character already knows about. So that's something that I personally liked because it was like a kind of fresh spin on the revenge genre. But not only that, the last like 5 minutes also just is like a whoa. It's really interesting. I wish more people had seen this movie because looking online, it doesn't really seem many people have caught on to this movie, but would definitely recommend you guys check out Bull. It's a rock solid movie, and that's why I personally, Bull, I will be giving a... Next up, we have Honk for Jesus, Save Your Soul. This is a movie I was quite excited for, just the fact that it has Regina Hall, who I'm a huge fan of, and then Sterling K. Brown, who I also have grown to really appreciate, especially his role in Waves. So I was quite curious. Also, I grew up in a very religious household, so this is another reason why I was kind of excited about a movie that's, almost like a satire of the church. So I was curious about it, and I gotta say, it's an okay movie. By no means is it bad, but by no means is it great. It's somewhere in the middle. I enjoyed it overall, but I can't lie, it's a pretty forgettable movie. I saw this at the beginning of September, and I'm filming this on October 2nd. I barely remember this movie. Honestly, it doesn't really stick with you. And it's a shame because, if it's a satire and it's supposed to be comedic, you would think that some of the comedy would stick, but it also is a movie that's trying to have some dramatic heft, but unfortunately that dramatic heft falls flat. So it's somewhere in the middle. I enjoyed some of it, but again, it just didn't really stick with me. And personally, Honk for Jesus, Save Your Soul, I personally will be giving a... Next up, we have Barbarian, which I hadn't seen the trailer. I had no clue what this was about other than it's a horror film, and that apparently it's really surprising. And surprising is understated. This movie really surprised me. This is a really good film. This is one of my favorite films of the year. That being said, I've only seen this movie one time, and I might, in one of the later catch-up videos, if I do watch this a second time before the end of this year, I am curious how the second viewing will hold up, because the first viewing, it's that experience of, oh boy, what's going to happen next? Like, I don't understand what's going on. Like, it's that whole experience, and it's great. But I'm wondering how the rewatchability value will be for this movie, because on a filmmaking level, it's pretty darn great. And I think that the blend of thrills, horror, and comedy at times works really well. A lot of really good twists and turns, a lot of moments that I was pretty surprised by. I will say towards the end, there isn't very obvious green screen moment. It involves a character jumping and the camera's tilted up, and I felt like I almost could see the green screen. I was like, oh gosh, it just wasn't a good moment. The last 5 minutes in general wasn't the strongest, but everything that came before it, I really liked. And my rating is going to be based on the whole experience as well as what I thought of the filmmaking. So for me, Barbarian, I personally will be giving a Next up, we have Don't Worry, Darling, which is a movie that's very polarizing, both with critics and seems like audience members, just because I feel like a lot of people are getting into the behind the scenes drama and everything. I don't really care about that, to be honest. I was just looking at the movie as itself, and the movie as it holds. I actually enjoy it. Great cinematography. Love the wide angle shots, especially towards the end with the chase. Love the score. The score was something I really dug. Acting was pretty good for the most part. Wasn't the biggest fan of Harry's style during some sequences, but overall the acting I thought was pretty good. Florence Pugh killed it. Great production design, great makeup that transports you into the 1950s. Really good stuff. Again, it does have its issues. I do think that towards the end it does kind of fall flat with the actual execution of a certain twist. That twist, unfortunately, was kind of spoiled for me going into it, which is a shame because I read on TikTok, of all places, that this movie was similar to like another movie, which I won't name. But I was very annoyed by that because I feel like the twist in this movie I would have been surprised by had I not known it kind of going into it. But overall, I enjoyed this movie. It is flawed for sure, but it is a movie I would say is worth your time, at least for one viewing. And personally, Don't Worry, Darling, I will be giving a. Next up, we have Pearl, which is the prequel to the film X, which I really liked earlier this year. X was a movie that has vibes of like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but it's done in a way that, yeah, some people might be like, oh, it's following horror tropes, but I can see what they're saying, but at the same time, I think that it's just done so well that I just couldn't help but get taken aback by how well crafted this film was. I really dug it. Similar to Barbarian, I'm curious how it's going to hold up upon second viewing, but I will say this. When I heard that there's a prequel called Pearl, I was like, I wonder how that's going to be. But at the same time, I'm curious about it and kind of excited about it. And after watching Pearl, I thought this movie was all right. I think that it has a stunning monologue by Mia Goth, who, by the way, is incredible. But that monologue, it's like 8, 9 minutes long. It is outstanding and truly captivating. Dialogue in that scene is also great. And the last scene itself, I think, is also really good. And I also like the contrast of the Wizard of Oz-esque cinematography matched with everything that's going on screen that's at times pretty horrific. I think that that was an interesting contrast that works really well going against and being able to differentiate between this and X. That being said, I do think that this movie was a little too long, which is a shame me saying that because this movie really isn't that long to begin with. But I also just felt like there were a lot of moments that I was kind of taken out of because I was like, okay, I know this isn't going to happen because I've seen X. And also certain moments that are in Pearl, I feel like if you watch Pearl first before X, certain moments are kind of deflated in X because of watching Pearl first. I'm just saying that as someone that's kind of watching it as like a viewer that's like, hey, there are going to be people in the future that are going to watch Pearl first and then X, not someone like myself that watched X first and then Pearl. So I don't know. I get why people really are taken to Pearl. I get it. I respect it, but I wasn't in love with this movie. But again, I still am positive about it overall, and I personally will be giving Pearl a. Next up, we have The Woman King. This movie, I don't want to say I was excited about it. I really wasn't. I remember seeing glimpses of the trailer and I was like, I don't know what this movie is, but I'll watch it when it comes out. And then when it came out, it got critical acclaim, and I was even more excited because I heard it was like Black Panther meets Braveheart. And to some extent, yes, it is. To some extent, I will say I quite liked this movie. I think that Viola Davis does a great job. Fantastic costume design, amazing production design. Action scenes are pretty well done, although I will say what holds this movie back truly is that it should have been R-rated. There are certain sequences in this movie during the action where I really felt as if they were holding back because it's PG-13. And that's a shame because, again, I do feel like an R rating would have benefited, just like something like Braveheart, just like something like Gladiator. But at the same time, I also respect them going for a PG-13 rating in this case, because in this case, they're trying to open it up to a wider audience so that a wider audience is making this movie accessible so that way more people can really kind of get into this movie. And I can respect that because I do feel like this is a movie that more people should see. It's a really well-crafted movie. It's not perfect. I do have some issues with it. But overall, I do think this is rock solid. Definitely worth your time. The Woman King, I personally will be giving a. Next up, we have Pleasure, which is a movie I've been looking forward to for over a year, I would say. This was a movie that was supposed to come out in theaters near us in May, which I was really pumped about. But then all of a sudden, AMC theaters, they took it off the slot. And then on top of that, no theaters near me were playing it, really. So I missed out on this movie. And then finally, I was scrolling through Showtime. Actually, when I was checking out the movie Bowl, I was scrolling through Pleasure, and I stumbled across it. I was like, oh my goodness, it's on Showtime. I gotta watch this. So I watched it, and I watched the unrated cut. And I liked Pleasure a lot. This is definitely a movie that I can see myself revisiting and liking it even more. Because as a first-time viewing, there were certain things that I wouldn't say I was a huge fan of, but overall, I quite liked this movie. Great lead performance. I think that it being directed by a woman is also something that's very fascinating because it's an eye-opening experience of the porn industry. Like, I haven't really seen something like this movie before in terms of how it's done. Like, I love the fact that there are certain sequences where the porn's done by a woman, directed-wise, and then certain sequences are directed by a man in terms of, in the context of the movie. I thought that was interesting because you can see the contrast between how it's done in the industry and everything. And I was like, wow, that's really subtle, but really well done. It's really well directed. Great lead performance. I think that it's well shot. It's just a movie that overall, I can see why some people might not like it because emotionally speaking, the lead character isn't like super, super emotional. And that might hold some things back for certain viewers. I can respect that to an extent. But for me, I quite like this movie and Pleasure. I personally will be giving a... Next up, we have The Munsters, which is Rob Zombie's latest movie, and I think this kind of set the nail in the coffin, so to speak. That I'm not really a Rob Zombie fan. I'm really not. I really didn't like The Munsters like at all. I don't want to go on a rant on it because I'm sure there's some people out there that like this movie, especially if they saw the TV show, which I did not. But it just didn't really gel with me, man. I wish that I could say that it did because I was kind of curious about this movie going into it, but coming out, I really did not like this movie. I am going to be ranking Rob Zombie's movies. I still have to possibly run across his first movie, one of his first movies, which was like an anime movie. I still have to watch that one, but Rob Zombie, man, his movies give me headaches, and that doesn't really happen with directors. But Rob Zombie, give you credit where credit's due, man. But The Munsters, I personally will be giving a... Next up, we have the most divisive, controversial movie of the year. We have Blonde, which, I'm not going to lie, I was quite excited for this movie because I'm a huge fan of the assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford. That movie is a masterpiece in my eyes, and it's directed by Andrew Dominic, who also is doing Blonde. So I was very curious about Blonde. And on top of that, Ana de Armas, I'm a huge fan of. And this is one of those rare occasions where I can see both sides of the spectrum as to why some people would absolutely love this movie, but also why some people would hate this movie. I can see that. I'm somewhere in the middle, but I am more positive, which I know some people are like, I can't believe it. Look, I think the filmmaking is outstanding, and me personally, I do lean more towards like, movies that the filmmaking stands out. Like, I like that. This movie takes a lot of risks in terms of how it's shot, like the different aspect ratios, the usage of color, a lot of things that are very symbolic and things that most people aren't going to really pick up on, and that's okay. And I also really like the score. The score can go from being very beautiful to having like a Twin Peaks-esque kind of Laura Palmer theme to then having sequences that sound like it's from Joker. And I think that's the interesting part is that the score plays such an important role in not only the sound mixing, but the story itself. And that's something I feel like also is really, really missing from certain movies. Like, I feel like a lot of times, and I've said this before, a lot of big blockbusters have it now, where the scores are just playing very subtly in the background, and I'm not a big fan of that. I like it when it's in the forefront, and you can tell that there's a score and everything, because that plays such a big part, and I like that they did that in Blonde. Not going to go too in depth, like I said, about Blonde, but again, I can see why some people like it. It seems why some people hate it. Me, I liked it. I probably will check it out a second time, not going to lie. I'm very curious how the rewatchability value will be, but overall, Blonde, I personally will be giving a... So you guys, those are the movies, the 10 movies I believe it is that I saw in September 2022. October is going to be a hectic month, both for personal reasons, but also in terms of just movies in general that are going to be coming out. So I'll try to get you guys my October catch-up video at the beginning of November. We'll see how that goes. But guys, Let me know the movies you saw in September 2022. All the 2022 movies down below. And as always, guys, thank you very much for watching with the subscription, notification bell, and I'll get you guys later.